Hey guys, what is going on? Welcome back to the channel. It is Jake Sanderson, aka Snowman Cycling, and I am back once again with another treat for you. This time we've got another retrospective, another vintage flashback like we did last week, looking at a really important, really close to my heart ZRL Zwift Racing League race. Last time it was a heartbreaking defeat. This time it's closer to my heart for an entirely different reason, so I'm excited to share this one with you as we're tackling 2 laps of KAS Pats, which means 2 sprints, the Aqueduct KOM and the KAS Pats KOM, not once but twice. And this one we're going to be trying to get as many points as we can for the team, and also vying for our first ever Zwift Racing League stage win. Let's see, can we do it? Let's kick this one off. We're going to skip through it, have a look at the crucial moments. And this one was particularly harsh because there was a sprint on the lead-in, and you know the score with ZRL. Every segment is scored on fastest through the segment and first across the line, so it's going to be hectic. But thankfully for me, I don't need to worry about these sprints too much, especially not on the first lap, because my job is going to be save myself for later on. I've got teammates who are going for this sprint to pick up points for the team. All I need to do is worry about closing those gaps, getting on the wheels, making sure that I'm at the front of the race if it splits. And it's the same for the next sprint 10 kilometers later. So we're going to have a look at that one. The cobbled sprint, I hate this one. It's way too long. Make sure you don't make the mistake I made. Have road feel on your trainer, and be bouncing around all over the place like you're on a pneumatic drill. Once again here, I don't have to do anything. I just let my teammates do the work for me. Make sure I close the gaps, get onto those wheels at the front, as the real chaos is about to ensue. We are about to hit the Aqueduct KOM, just a K or 2 after that sprint. And there are definitely going to be some gaps in the peloton after that. We need to be at the front, make sure we don't get dropped. And because of the nature of these races with the segment points on offer, as you can see, by the time we get to the KOM here, there's already quite a lot of gaps behind me, just because people are pushing the pace. People want those FAL first across the line points, especially if they don't have the pep in the step of a sprinter to be able to sit on the wheels and just come around everybody in the last 100 meters or so. So the diesel engines are pushing the pace here, and it's having an effect. They're definitely getting rid of some riders. So I'm just doing my thing, surfing the wheel. I'm still having to do quite a lot of watts here just to sit in, make sure that I'm sat on those wheels, as my teammates again do the dirty work for me, come through the segment, taking some incredibly valuable points, meaning that I am free to go as hard as I can on the KOM coming up next in just a couple of K. So the group does come back together a little bit here after everybody eases up. And even though I've not had to go hard on these segments, it still hurts. It still hurts doing this power, closing the wheels. And it's about budgeting that energy, trying to save as much of it for later on as we can. And that's going to be even more important because, as we can see here, by the time we get to that first KOM, that front group has been reduced even more to about 22 riders. It's going to be really, really important not to let the wheels go, definitely not to let any gaps open. As you can see, we're still doing quite high pace. It's over 20 miles an hour, 32 kph, even on this 3%, which means the group draft is vital. So I'm going to be doing what I can to save as much energy on these climbs as possible, but surf the wheels, move up when I have to, and as we can see here, when the gaps open, be prepared to close them myself. Don't rely on anybody else because they might be cooked. That might be why they're this far back. I'm this far back trying to get draft savings, trying to save energy. But as we said time and time again, you got to be prepared to gamble. And this is a gamble. This gap opens up and I have to quickly and decisively make the decision to bridge up and close it. The riders behind me, this might be game over for them. They may never be coming back on this 4-5% climb that's still got probably about 4 minutes left on it. So their main aim is going to be survival, just see if they can get to the top and maybe reconnect with the front group as we go down the descent. But for me, my aim here is FAL and FTS. This is the point we've been waiting for in the race. My teammates have done the great job on the 3 segments up until here, and now it's my turn to take the baton and try and score some points for our team. So I absolutely cannot let the front of that race go, and in fact, I'm going to have to make a decision further on up this climb how I can best score those FAL or those FTS points. And that means we either go hard from, say, halfway up the climb and try and crack as many people as we can on the way up and try and take points that way, or, and in my opinion, this makes much more sense seeing as this is the first of 2 laps. This is the first time we're going to go up this climb. We're going to have to save some energy for the segments, the sprints and the climbs on the second lap. So instead, I think we can use our drafting ability here, one of our super strengths, And when the time comes, rely on another one of our best strengths, the sprint, to try and take those points in the last 100 meters of this climb. Let everybody else work for us on the way up, drag us to the top, and then do a courageously cowardly sprintery thing to do, come around them and try and take max points. And if you've been watching this channel for long enough, you know that 9 times out of 10, I will always go for the lazy option. I am a sprinter. It's about energy conservation. And if there's one thing I'm not afraid to do, it is sit on the wheels of my rivals and really, really annoy them. And remember, I'm never thinking about winning races at this point. You can't win a race from here. You can only lose it. If you get dropped here and you don't get back on, you've lost the race. And also, as we saw in last week's race, you can throw away the win by going too hard, too early, and blowing all that energy that you should have been saving for the finale. So with that in mind, we make the decision here to go with the sprint option. And we're in a great position here of I know we are going to get points regardless because there's only 9 riders in the front group. So under the magic 10 marker, the first 10 for these segments pick up points. And I've actually got quite a useful power up for this one, the burrito, which stops people drafting you. So I see the rider at the front of the group deploy his burrito. So I know this is it. I have to deploy mine. And here comes the sprint. We're starting it. We're trying to open up. And this rider here on the front, very, very strong. I think he's going to hold me off, but I just managed to grit my teeth, grip the drop, and just about come around him to take fastest through the segment and first across the line, max points on the climb. Really, really pleased with that. The plan played out to perfection, and I just have to hope we didn't use too much energy then that we're going to need later on. But thankfully, we get a really long descent here. I think it's 3 kilometers of descent, so plenty of time for the main group behind to bunch up, get together, recover, get some draft on that downhill, because the next segment is the sprint at the bottom as we go through the start-finish banner. And this time, this lap, it's going to be a totally different dynamic because the front group, including us and our teammate David, is now down to only 7 riders, which means that we are going to have to sprint and try and take points on every single one of the segments coming up here if we want the win as a team. So that's bad news for me and David. We're not going to get any recovery. We might be able to alternate our efforts on these segments, but realistically, we're both going to have to try to scrape up any points we can on every single segment between now and the finish. And some of you may be wondering here why we made the decision to ease up a little bit and not press on to the next sprint and maybe even press on to the end of the course. And the answer to that is because it's just not energy efficient. If we'd gone as hard as we could here, trying to hold off a group that was only 3, 4, 5 seconds behind us here, on this 3K descent as 2 lightweight riders, we'd have used too much energy, and by the time we get to the sprint, we'd have been cooked. It just doesn't make any sense, especially not when you consider that me and David are probably the best sprinters in this group, which means that we have the advantage of, even if these riders catch us, being able to sit on them and come around them on the segments to take the points. Seeing as this is a point and a segment based race, we have to find the best way to maximize those points, and this is it. If there had been another couple of riders in this group, maybe we could have thought about working together to try and stay away. But with 5 riders behind chasing us that are in all likelihood going to get back on, we're going to work smart, not hard, and let's have a look at this next sprint. And just as we're about to hit it, we can see a really good example of game race theory here, as one of the riders in the pack 35 seconds back says, "We need to work together now, peeps." But unfortunately for him, they don't, and it's just so difficult for groups behind to cohesively and effectively work and coordinate a chase group that's got a chance of catching. So the pressure's on them, and that's why you really don't want to let the wheel go and make sure you're at the front unless you're absolutely dead. And as we hit that sprint, I open it up, launch it, so does David, and we probably overestimated our competition and how cooked they were at this point. We probably used a bit too much energy that we didn't really need to use, and we'll have to see later on if that costs us, as we do manage to get first and second across the line on that sprint, with a 20-meter gap showing that the other riders were probably not even trying that hard because they were still super cooked from the climb. So then it's just about recovering as best as we can for the next 10k until we come back around to that cobbled sprint. Are we going to keep the group behind at bay? They're 30 seconds back. Let's have a look. And as we get to that next Pave Sprint, we can see that the gap behind has opened up even more to 45 seconds. So the group behind has got literally no chance of catching at this point. Even though me and David have sat on and done absolutely no pulling, no work for this group, the gap's still getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So we sit on, do what we said we were going to do last time, sit on the group, and then open up our sprints. And this time we thought we'd go a little bit easier, maybe try and save a little bit of energy, but it nearly costs us as the riders behind are going harder on this one. So I almost have to open up again a second time on the sprint and manage to come across the line for first with David second. But that was a lot closer, and the riders behind have clearly been budgeting their energy to save it for the big moments, whereas we have been blowing that energy all over the road to get those segment points. So is that going to cost us? Well, as we hit the Aqueduct in just a K, I am feeling extremely cooked and I don't really have much, so I may have gone too hard too early, but let's have a look at it. And as we hit the Aqueduct, I've got one eye on the Petite KOM, which is coming just straight after. So I'm going to try and get some points here, but try and save what I can. So my idea is to try and draft the wheels on this steeper part of the climb. As we go around the bend, we hit the flat a bit. I'm going to open up my sprint, try and come past as many people as I can and get some points. Whilst I'm doing that, David's going really hard on the front here. He's really good at these sorts of climbs, so I've got faith he can pick up some points. And as I open up here, I've left it a little bit late and the gap started to open up. So I've made a bit of a mistake there. And look, I've gone too late. So the rider ahead of me is using a draft power up, and the gap gets bigger and bigger as I'm doing 600 watts. So bit of a mistake there, but luckily David got some points and I still managed to pick up 5th across the line points. So still some valuable points there. And we've got one eye on the Petite KOM in just a couple of K. And it means that we've saved a little bit of energy. We got some in reserve for this climb that's going to come up in just a couple of K, which is going to be the most important segment of the entire race. That climb is going to decide everything. It's going to be really, really crucial to make sure we've saved some watts and we've got some matches left for that climb. And as we hit that climb, we have to have one eye on the finish here. Remember, we're going for our first ever Zwift Racing League stage win, and we got to play this tactically. We saw over the last climb, we saw over the last few segments that we got a really good chance to win if we play it correctly. And usually a sprint would be a fantastic option for us, especially in a reduced group of 7 where we have one of the best sprints. However, if you go to a 7-man bunch group sprint, then your chances of winning are still just 1 in 7. And I'm a gambling man, I like odds. When I'm cooked, when I have to take my chances in the sprint, then I'm more than happy to do so. But if I feel good, and if I feel like I am one of the strongest riders, and I don't try and get rid of some riders from that group before we get to the sprint, then I've done myself a disservice and weakened my chances of getting that win. So as we hit the base of this climb, I've got it in my mind that I'm going to try and draft the group for the first half of this climb at least, and then see if I can strike out on my own and get away from this group on the climb and try and get to the top solo and see, can I hold that gap over the top and to the finish? But that is a long, long way away. We are at the base of this climb, and the rider on the front of this group, C. Barlow, is actually an A rider who'd just come back indoors from a summer out on the bike and thus wasn't an A on Zwift power. He's 55 kilos and he can do 5.2 watts per kilo for 20 minutes, which means he is shredding this group as hard as he can. He's trying to hold his tempo at the front of this group because he's got no sprint. His sprint is 6.5 watts per kilo for 15 seconds. And in all fairness to this guy, even though he could smash me over a 20-minute to hour-long uphill TTT every day of the week, I have literally seen paint dry quicker than 6.5 watts per kilo. So his only chance here is to get rid of me and the other sprinters, the good riders with the pep, from the base of this climb by going as hard as he can. He plays his cards here to perfection. You can only work with what you've got. He's not a sprinter, so he can't win the sprint. He has to go now. I really like this move from Barlow. It was exactly what I'd do in his situation, and it means I have to be super alert to him or any other riders getting away from this group and getting a gap where there's no draft available. So for the first half of this climb, my only aim is going to be to not let him or any of the other riders get away and spit me out the back. Then for the second half, we're going to think about when to go, and we're going to pick a point and we're going to launch it. I've told David on the race radio that's my plan, and he can either sit in the group and sit on them, or he can try and come with me and we'll work together, but that's what I'm going to do. And at this point, the group has been further reduced down to 6 riders, and looking at that start-finish banner up ahead, I know that if I want to get enough of a gap to be able to sustain a lead down that 3K of descent as a solo lightweight rider, that I must go now. So this is it. I say on the race radio, I'm going David. He elects to sit in, at least for this point, whilst I go as hard as I can and let the riders behind tries to close the gap and get on my wheel, or they're going to let me go. Spencer Tapia, the rider just behind, does his best to try and cling on, but eventually he elects to give up the ghost as well, as the riders around me either decide that they won't come with me because this is a stupid move and it's not going to work, or that they can't come with me because they're already cooked and they haven't got the watts to do so. I know if I was watching this attack, I would try to go with that rider. We're so close to the end of the race that it's a gamble to let anybody get away at this stage. And some of you can spot behind there that David has also launched his attack. We had a DS on the race radio who said, David, if you feel good, now is the time to go. Try and bridge up to Jake. Just make sure you don't take anybody with you. And David does a tremendous job of getting separation from that group and then powering on, forcing them to chase him whilst he tries to work up to me. And I know we've got a great chance here as I managed to go through that finish banner with 50-meter gap. First place on the foul, and only 2 seconds slower than on the first lap, which, considering we already did this climb with a much bigger group with much more draft on the first lap when everyone had more energy, I'm really pleased with that. And I am really hurting. The lactic acid is pumping in my legs, but I am feeding on that adrenaline. I am telling myself, hyping myself up, that this is going to be my first ever Zwift Racing League stage win. I really want this win. And I'm prepared to ignore the lactic acid, the pain, the searing lungs, go over my limit, over my threshold, empty the tank and give it every single last watt we've got to try and take home this win. And as I'm doing that, I've got one very close eye on my teammate David just behind. I can see that he's putting in a tremendous effort. So we say on the race radio that I'll ease up a little bit, not try and drop David here, see if he can come up to me and the two of us can work together as a pair of riders rather than just two solos 50 meters apart on the road trying to hold off the chasing pack 10 seconds behind. Having said that, there was absolutely no discussion on the race radio about who would take the win. There was no agreements, there were going to be no gifts, no deals. David didn't want to give this one to me, I certainly didn't want to give this one to David, but let's take this to a position where either of us can win and then we're going to fight it out for the bragging rights for the stage win. And as we get into that final 600 meters, the DS comes on the race radio and tells us that we have a sufficient lead of 10 seconds over the riders behind us. They're not going to be able to catch, and we're able to battle it out mano a mano. So I elect to launch my sprint with 300 meters to go, knowing David's got a very good 10-second sprint. And I probably want to try and get rid of him as early as possible. Evidently, the oxygen debt is setting in because I didn't even think to use my burrito power up. But in the end, it does not matter. We take the win this time, and we're able to sit up with 150 meters to go and really savor that victory with a terrible celebration. You'd have thought waiting for a Zwift Racing League win for that long, I would have had a better celebration lined up and ready to go, but no. Sheer exhaustion and an absence of any carbs or glucose left in my body, mixed with elation, joy, adrenaline, and a little bit of disbelief, means that that was the best I could muster. So the overall average power for that one was only 3.5, but the NP, the normalized power, was significantly higher at just over 4.0 for the duration. So I hope you enjoyed this retrospective vintage flashback. Please, as I always say, remember to like, comment and subscribe. It really helps the YouTube algorithm for smaller channels like mine and shows you enjoyed this content that I make for free. And most importantly, remember, race fast, ride hard, and that you are appreciated.